this is a really reactive, impromptu podcast in light of the recent NMC changes. So I'm going to read out the NMC changes in their guidance for those that are not aware. So the NMC has announced that from the 1st of June 2025, remote prescribing for non-surgical cosmetic medicines will be banned. All nursing and midwifery prescribers must now conduct a face-to-face consultation before prescribing treatments such as anti-wrinkle injections, aka Botox, or emergency kit items. It then goes on to say important clarifications. So remote prescribing will be banned for non-surgical cosmetic medicines, so they've made that really clear. Remote consultations, this includes video or telephone, will no longer be permitted. All consultations must now be face-to-face before a prescription is issued. Prescribers must ensure any person they delegate to is suitably qualified and be satisfied that they are competent and proficient in administering the medicine and carry out the procedure at suitable premises. So premises is a key thing which we'll go through as well. Prescribers remain responsible at all times for the overall oversight and care of each individual, including assessing outcomes and managing any adverse incidents or complications. And then finally, really importantly, it says breaches of this requirement could become a fitness to practice issue with the NMC, which we all know in layman's terms means you've got the risk of being struck off the nursing register. Now, before we go forward and we chat about this, I also want to highlight that these rules also apply to doctors and dentists. So the GMC and the GDC have the same stance on this. I have had this clarified and the same rules do apply. So this is a huge talking point. As you know, Dawn and I are joint directors of the Training Academy. So we know that this is going to raise a lot of concerns potentially for people that we have coming through the academy that are medical, because we only train medical practitioners, but medical practitioners that don't have that prescribing qualification. So all the doctors that come through, we do train many doctors, obviously all automatically are prescribers with their role, as are dentists, but nurses, it's different. So you can be a nurse without having a prescribing qualification. So this is why we wanted to jump on. I know it seems quite reactive and it wasn't planned, this podcast at all, but we just thought, let's just share some ideas, let's look at some solutions and what potentially this might mean for people going forward. So I know Dawn isn't clinical. The clinical, oversight is all on me. So Dawn's had a brief rundown of the history, but I'll go through the history as well. So I know you were a little bit worried about jumping on the podcast, weren't you, Dawn, together, because you feel a little bit...
So I am the sort of digital side of things, so my partnership within the business is all about the systems and the tech and all that kind of stuff and making things work, basically, from that business perspective. So, but I do understand all of this that is going on, and I can understand how people are fearing what's going to come and all that kind of stuff. So yeah, it was really important that I think we jumped on today just to kind of basically try and help people. That's the idea of this, isn't it? Let's be reactive to what's going on and see what we can offer in the way of a solution and just to help people, really. So
we look at solutions and we don't just focus on problems. So just as a brief history, I did my prescribing, it's years ago now, back in like 2011, 2012, I think it was. When I came into aesthetics as a nurse, I wasn't a prescriber, but I could kind of see the way it was going. So how it used to work is basically many nurses over the country, myself included, would tap into a service that was offered by a doctor. Now, I'm not sure if I can go into names and things like that for legal reasons, so I won't. But you would literally give the doctor a call. He would ask for the patient details. You would give him them details over the phone. At the time, not even a video consultation. It was just all done audio over the phone. And he would give the go-ahead. That patient's fine to have a prescription, say, for Botox, and then you would get your Botox delivered. But what happened was there was a program, like an undercover program that was done on this particular doctor, because he was basically doing prescribing this way for like hundreds of nurses all over the country. And to cut a long story short, the GMC, it came to light when this other programme was done, and I think they struck him off the register as a doctor. I'm not quite sure, I can't say 100%, but something happened anyway. And in light of that, the regulations came about. I was under the impression that face-to-face prescribing was a must anyway, and that remote prescribing wasn't allowed, which is why I then went on to do my prescribing qualification. So whenever I have done prescribing for other nurses in the past, I've always gone face-to-face because I was under the impression that that was the rules and that's what we had to do. So I never kind of, as a prescriber, kind of cut any corners that way anyway. I mean, I haven't done it for years because I'm too busy now, but I thought that was just the way. But it seems that that isn't what's been going on. That since COVID, the lines have got a little bit blurred.
Mm-hmm.
And I think remote prescribing has become a big thing, a lot more than I actually ever realised. So I think this is now why the Nursing Council have really stamped down and made it really clear with those guidance that no, video call isn't allowed, it's got to be done face to face. There are many drugs that are prescribed in aesthetics, so potentially it's going to be a real area of concern for people that have busy aesthetic practices or people that are just starting in aesthetics that aren't prescribers. So we're trying to kind of get our heads together now, aren't we, and think, right, what does this mean in terms of people's clinics that are already established and people that are just starting out?
This is where it's super important that you get across all of this information that we can then put out there and discuss what the solutions are and what people can tap into and all that kind of stuff, really.
I mean, I think first and foremost, and I know a lot, some nurses might not want to hear this, but I would say the biggest solution to this, if you can, is do your prescribing course.
Yeah.
It's 6 months. Yeah, it's not an easy 6 months. Doing it privately, it's going to cost. You've got all that to think about, but you've got to think about future-proofing yourself long term.
Yeah.
And it's worth its weight in gold just to have that 6 months of sacrifice to then be able to still practice independently without all these other different logistical issues kind of going forward.
Yeah, and I think actually, because some people, when they think of cost, it's like, can I afford this, But I think I would be looking at it in terms of, can I afford not to do this? And also work out maybe how many clients have you got right now? How many, prescriptions you're having to pay for? What does that look like in the future for you? Because what you're actually about to invest in terms of time and money to get a prescriber's license, what is that actually going to cost you in prescriptions anyway? So maybe one of the things that you've put off for such a long time because it felt like I've got a good system going, everything's fine. But realistically, you are handing that money over to somebody else anyway, when you could be having that money inside of your own business. And, so that investment that goes into doing this prescribers, and again, I'm not clinical, so I can speak quite objectively as somebody who's just thinking from a business head point of view here. If that was me and if it was me doing my own clinic, obviously, I know I'm in the clinic with you and doing what we're doing, but, I'd be thinking, I'd be researching, I'd be looking into this, I'd be saying, right, what do I need? What does it take? When could I get started? When could I where could I get the money from? And maybe some of the sort of funds, or some of the profit that's coming back into the clinic that you've currently got, put that aside so that you can think, right, okay, well, I can't maybe afford it right now, but if I set this amount of money aside from my business, I can reinvest that into my prescribers. So that's where I would be thinking probably in terms of that.
Definitely. That's kind of the conclusions that I drew back in 2011. I was thinking, well, I'm handing all this money over every month to this certain doctor, and then I looked at the cost of the prescribing, and I thought, you work out, well, it's only going to take me however many months or whatever to recoup that money back in, and it's a business cost. It's a cost to your business. I do think if that's the first solution, I would say, if you've got the means and if you've got the enthusiasm to think, right, this is the time, I would just go for it. I'd be inquiring at different universities. I know different universities at the time when I did it did have slightly different rates, and I think for us as an academy, there are ways that we can possibly support students doing the prescribing course as well. I mean, I will need to look into it because things have changed since I did it, but a lot of the time when you're doing your prescribing course, you do need like a medical mentor or somebody to sign off your paperwork and things like that. So there may be opportunities where that we can open up where we can help and support students through their prescribing course.
Yeah.
So in any way that we can help, obviously, we will. I know at the time I worked with a GP, so I'd have to kind of go in and sit in his GP surgery, and I paid him privately, but then I also had to pay at Leeds Uni as well privately for the course. But if it was me and I was a nurse and I wasn't a prescriber, even if I were just getting going, I'd be thinking, this is the way it's going, future myself, and I would have it somewhere scheduled in a plan to undertake my prescribing course. Now, I know that some people it's just not possible for them. It is quite a lengthy, in-depth course. And we have got people, I guess, in the academy, haven't we, that are running really successful businesses with
absolutely,
and they've always done it above board. You know, they've always had that prescriber that does attend their clinic face to face. And myself, as a nurse prescriber, I used to go to people's clinics face to face, and they ran really successful clinics. So it still can be done face to face. It's just a case of having the proper planning and the systems and things like that, I think, in place to make it work and make it successful.
Yeah, because there's a lot of evidence out there that it works for people, you know, it does. I mean, obviously this has all come to light now because like it's been in place for as long as you've ever known, but clearly it's come back on the radar, it's out there now, it's put the fear-mongering into people, but those who've been doing it right for all this time, they're running really successful clinics and they've got a system going. We know that there's people within the academy that they just have consultation days and everybody gets booked up. One of the students the other day was saying completely packed out with, I don't know, 10, 12 people did she have coming in? I can't remember. All lined up, all done, and it's a really seamless operation. And that's how I think you've got to think of it. It's a business, and how can I make this business seamless without friction with not just yourself, not just with the prescriber, but with the patient, you know, like the client that walks through the doors. It's got to work for everybody, hasn't it? And I think as long as you've got a really good system and a process in place to do that, then it shouldn't really be an issue.
No, and I think, like you say, you as the practitioner, you lead your clients that way. And what you've got to remember now is as well, now the regulations have tightened up, it's pretty much going to be that way for everybody that's not a prescriber. Even if they're non-medical, it's going to be that way. So it's not a case of, well, you know, that potential client's just going to go down the road and get that treatment straight away, because it's going to be the same across the board, and you're all leading those clients that way together, and it becomes an expectation. Then it's like, yeah, okay, let's get you booked in for prescribers, you know, prescribing evening or whatever. You come, get your prescription, and then we'll just book you in for your treatment. It's just, that's how it works, and that's how it's done. And even if you are a prescriber, you still be your patient first. It's a case of, it's the attitude you adopt, I guess. It's like, right, how can we get this system in place?
Yeah, it probably is that optimism that you've got to have around this, because otherwise, what's the alternative? It's happened. It's been in place anyway for so long, but these other people are feeling now like, oh my goodness. But if you've been doing everything right anyway, then you shouldn't have any problems. And if you have been using the remote side of it, then there's many people out there who are successfully making it work. So I would be thinking, well, that's reassuring. It's new to me because I've been doing it that way for whatever reason, but it's reassuring to know that it does work, and a lot of people have built incredibly successful businesses by doing it the face-to-face way. It just means that's the approach you've now got to take, and just kind of approach it in the way where you feel, right, okay, let's do this. What do I need to do? Rather than going, oh, that, you know, people are probably going to go, oh, what's the point? I'm going to quit. I don't really think that's necessary to kind, you know.
No. And I think you've got to think about the pricing element as well. So if you're doing things properly, and if you're a clinic that values safety, values ethics, hopefully your prices are going to be able to deliver a safe service, an ethical service, and take pride in the work that you do. There's going to be some room, hopefully, somewhere, if you set your prices right, for that prescribing fee. And I think if things are tightening up, hopefully the pricing with the right kind of Botox that's not unlicensed, it's not underground, it's sourced from a proper cosmetic pharmacy, it's all just done correctly, it should hopefully keep that kind of pricing structure up there rather than all these where you see Botox, £100 for 3 areas or something like that. We all know as clinics that this corner's cut because nobody that's doing it at that price is a voluntary worker. It's just, they're not. They're not out there doing it voluntary out of the goodness of the heart. I'm sorry, they're just not. So they're cutting corners somewhere. So they're cutting it either on the toxin that they're using, they might be black market sourcing it, not getting it from a proper cosmetic pharmacy where it's being stored properly, it's come from the manufacturer properly. They could be cutting corners on dilution, over diluting the product. Waste disposal. You hope to God nobody's sharing needles or, syringes and things like that, God forbid. There's so much that goes into it. It's not just a case of this is the Botox price in one place and that's the Botox in another.
I think actually from my side, my non-clinical side looking at this, I think it's about people like yourself, which I know you do a lot of anyway, and other clinic owners educating the public, because the public don't know what the public don't know. They just think, oh, Botox, so it's cheaper there. They don't understand why is it cheaper, why are they charging that and they're charging that, so I think ultimately needs to be a collective standpoint where all clinic owners are talking about this to their clients. It's the content that you should be putting on your socials, it's the content that you should be emailing your client list and going, right, this has happened in the industry. Let me explain why this is happening. Why is somebody cheaper down the road? You need to be asking yourself these questions and all that kind of stuff, because it's all right us saying that because we know it and we understand it. But I were having treatments way before I got into partnering with yourself. I didn't even really understand the ins and outs of it and why somebody would be cheaper. Now I understand it. I'm like, oh my goodness me, how can they even do it at that? So I think, again, it goes back to not being in that sort of fear phase, but in that excitement phase and thinking, right, finally, I can voice, I can put myself out there and tell my clients, this is what, and it's not about slagging people off in the local area, because actually you should all be working together. If everybody raises the prices, because ultimately what's happened is the prices were set there. I was 33, so it were really new. I paid something like, I'm telling you, I'm pretty sure it was something around a 500-ish price for 3 areas. I went to the best, which I assumed were the best. It was somewhere in Leeds. For me, it was like, right, okay, this is the standard price. And then slowly but surely over the years, like everybody then, it's that price competition then, isn't it?
Race to the bottom. I don't get it. At the bottom. Just doing yourself a disservice. It's just a whole topic for a podcast in it for a different time.
Totally, I mean, I'm not saying that they all have to. It needs to dispel all those practitioners that are doing something that you as a credible practitioner are looking and thinking that something's not right. And that's what the public need to know, isn't it? Why is it not right?
Because I think what's going to happen is it'll be more the non-medics, and I know I'm making assumptions, but I do think a medic has a lot more to lose than a non-medic, in the sense that they've got their PIN number that they've worked really hard for 3 or 4 years, they've studied for. They've got that regulatory body, they've got more to lose. So I think the true sort of ethical medical people that aren't prescribers aren't going to be at risk of trying to do anything underhand, going black market, using unlicensed.
Absolutely.
It's going to be your non-medics that don't have as much to lose. Not every non-medic, don't get me wrong, there'll be some non-medics that do work with prescribers, but I think when you're looking at cheap prices and things like that, you've got to be careful, because that's your unlicensed toxins. God knows what's in them. God knows where they've been sourced from. Going to come into play. So
and there's always going to, no matter what industry you're in, like I've been in marketing and sales and all that kind of stuff for like 11 years, and there's always the rogue ones that then make the others question everybody then, and then you've got the doubt. And it's so that no matter what industry you're in, there's always going to be those people. And like you've said, there's some non-medics who are incredible out there and that are doing everything right as well. And there are the non-medics out there that are probably, like you've said, they've got nothing to lose, like a PIN number or getting struck off or anything like that. So maybe they're like, game on. It's hard, isn't it? But I think ultimately, I think it is just about, as an industry, trying to raise the standards across the board with everything then.
Yeah, definitely. And I think what's probably going to happen, and we're going to give some support around this out with our account members that are prescribers, but I think it's going to be a case of really having your prescribing service that you would do for another medical professional really kind of nailed on, solid, and having a real system in place with clear terms, clear conditions that sets the bar for what's going to happen between you as the prescriber and the person who's the medical professional that's the non-prescriber. So you've got clear boundaries, you just know where you're at. Do you know what I mean? I think that's going to be the key thing, really. So when I used to prescribe years ago, I had a set fee per prescription, but then I would have a minimum fee that I would attend for. Then if one person or two people decided to show up instead of the 4 or 5 that they got planned, it was the practitioner's responsibility to ensure that I still received that minimal set fee, if that makes sense.
Yeah.
Because nobody's going to drive to somebody else's clinic for 1 prescription or 2 prescriptions.
And I guess it's that emergency one-off where you would pay the price for somebody doing that, wouldn't
you?
Yeah.
The cost has to go up because you've got to equally respect their time and expertise as well, haven't you? As well as them respecting yours. And so that's how I used to do it, but I would have set terms and conditions before we even entered into an agreement. For me, to feel confident doing that prescribing, I would need to see evidence of their PIN number that I would keep for my records. I would need to see evidence of their insurance, evidence of their certificates, where they've trained, what they've been deemed competent in. So that I've got evidence then to say, yeah, they're fine, yeah, they're safe, yeah, they're insured, yeah, this is the PIN number. And then in the T's and C's as well, it would have clearly outlined what I've just stated about the minimum fee, the prescription fee, things like that. I'm not going to go into it all in detail, but it's just making sure if you are considering prescribing for another practitioner, again, I only did it for medical professionals, that you've just got everything you need to ensure that you stay safe. So I know a lot of people, especially in the academy, we did a little poll this morning.
Yeah.
And I think the biggest concern that people had is the concern for their own safety, their own PIN number. Nobody wants to risk losing the livelihood for taking the risk of doing a prescription for somebody else. So it's the case of, right, how can I do this and maybe help other medical professionals, but make sure I'm doing it in a way where I'm protected should something go wrong. So ultimately, as it says in the NMC guidance, you do have that ultimate overall responsibility, I guess. But we'll be doing a lot more in the academy anyway to help people with that, just to make sure that if they do consider prescribing for others, that they do it in a really safe.
Yeah. And that, like what we've said as well, we could help to be the source of a database where people can come and find somebody geographically that works for them. They'll have come through the academy, so we know what they're all about, or we would have vetted them in a really strict manner and allow people to maybe be on a database, because that might be something that's needed. Where do I go? Who do I? That's the thing, isn't it? And I think if you can come to somebody like Timeless Training, then you'll know that if there's anybody that we're recommending, it's because we wholeheartedly, Gemma will have completely vetted that person with a fine-tooth comb, and you can feel confident that you've got that right person. And again, if there are any prescribers out there, so it's kind of twofold, isn't it? For the prescriber who's interested in thinking, do you know what, actually, there might be people who just decide that I could just do this as a business model. I might just be a prescriber because there's a lot of people out there who are going to need my help. And so we could help sort of curate those people. I know when I was in my previous marketing agency that I had, and it's totally a bit off topic, but, there were a lot of people when I used to build bots and all that kind of stuff. It was like, I couldn't service everybody. So I built a database where people filled all the details in, and I had that resource on my website. And then that was a great database for people to be able to go, all right, okay, Dawn's recommending them, I trust them. So, flipping it back to the aesthetic side of it, it's a similar thing, isn't it? It's a resource for people. And if we can help in any way, connect the dots for people, and it's all about collaboration, isn't it?
It is, yeah.
If you're not a prescriber and you need to, find somebody who is, then it's a collaborating and make sure that you've all got the same ethos and the same. It's all there. The resources are just there to help people, aren't they?
Making sure that everybody remains safe and
that's ultimately it, isn't it? It's about safety. It's about making sure that connecting with the right people. There are going to be, and again, I'm just talking from my own sort of non-medical perspective on this. Again, what will appear will maybe like the odd few rogue prescribers, that not, because at the end of the day, just because you're in medical, it doesn't mean that there aren't any people out there that are just opportunistic.
In every industry.
Absolutely.
You're a medical professional doesn't mean you're all friendly. Do you know what I mean?
Sometimes, where people see business opportunities, greed kicks in, and that's the unfortunate. That's the world. It doesn't really matter, does it? I mean, it doesn't really matter what you're in. There's always going to be those people, and I think that's the key thing. Just being mindful that you are with somebody who is going to be doing everything the right way. That's really going to be key.
An industry, just tightening up in general. So I know that the people that are non-prescribers that are trying to run a prescribing clinic and they're trying to get the logistics of prescribing in there, maybe it's a case of you take payment up front. Because I know we've talked about this in the clinic.
Yeah, we have.
It happens in so many places. You wouldn't go to a cosmetic surgery clinic and then the surgeon comes to see you or the person on reception once you're laid in your bed and take payment. It's all settled and done before you go. But that's in a lot of different businesses, not just something as drastic as surgery. A lot of places, payment is taken up front and then you basically attend on the day for the treatment that you're having. So
I actually do think that would be something that, again, I think it's a collective thing, like we spoke about, isn't it? Sometimes you've got to be the trailblazer in your industry and be brave. It's one of those things that it's like it might feel like a scary thing, but who doesn't want to be paid up front?
Exactly.
That's the thing, isn't it? Like we said, because then you're not worrying about the cancellations, and people probably wouldn't cancel as much because they know they've already paid. And then if you're the person, then if you're the clinic who needs to pay your prescriber, you're not worried about that. I don't know what that looks like, but I think that's something across the industry would be great.
It stops that getting your fingers burned. So it's only happened to me a few times, and it wasn't always a first-time client. So 2 times that it happened to me, these 2 particular clients had been kind of 2 treatments prior, almost like warming me up. Do you know what I mean? Gaining my trust and, everything's fine, there's been no problems. And then it was on like the 3rd visit with both of them really that suddenly when we went to take payment at the end, the card wasn't working, but she was kind of acting all confused. And then she said to me, I'll get the cash, I'll drop the cash through. And I kind of knew when she said that, I thought, what can you do? You can't hold them there in the clinic and say you're not leaving until
frog march them to the ATM.
So I had to let it go, and the cash never came through despite chasing it up. I never heard anything again, and it happened with somebody else who I treated 3 or 4 times. So it just takes out all that risk. You could have somebody in for something like an 8-point lift where it's £1,000 treatment. And you might have taken a hefty deposit, but still, what happens if you get to the reception then and payment defaults or something like that?
And it happens, and most people are usually genuine, but there are the odd ones that slip through the net, aren't they? And I think it as well, and like we said earlier, if you do it, then it'll make the other clinics around you feel excited, because everybody would want to be paid up front anyway. Everyone would love that. And then it's not going to be a case of, I'm going to go down the road because I can only pay a deposit there. It's like, no, they also take payment up front, and no, they also take payment up front. So if you work together, we can really make this industry something of maybe what it used to be.
It's self-respect. Ultimately what it boils down to. And those people, like say for instance, I've got friends I'm going off on a tangent here, that have got their own businesses, I wouldn't dream of going and having a service with that friend and not paying what the treatment cost is. I insist on it because I value them, I value their time, and but you always will get the takers of society and those that try and sort of prey on the weak and the vulnerable, and those that see putting a boundary up as something wrong when it's not. So I think collectively, if we stick together as a whole in terms of how things are done, how payments are taken, the price bracket that we're aiming for, be able to help more people. To be able to, it's not about we had this conversation in the academy the other day. It's about how can you invest back into your business to be able to help it grow and help ultimately more people. I've totally got confidence there.
I mean, and there'll be loads more podcasts that we can do in the future, can't we? There's loads more that that previously gone by, but lots more conversations around this. And I know this today was about what the news that's just broke, but everything I believe that we've spoken about is today, it all lends itself. It's almost like the building blocks of that initial scare that's just come out and everyone's probably freaking out. Everything that we've discussed today are the things that people need to now be thinking about.
The next thing that might come, which I think is going to come actually, is the premises. So where you're operating from, which again, if you have to have certain premises and eventually it has to be CQC registered, you can only provide that service if you're charging appropriately. Otherwise, you've got no bandwidth, you've got no room to be able to do that. So it is a medical procedure at the end of the day. It's about having an answerable regulatory body, and that's what keeps it safe. And I think to do that, it has to be medical.
There's got to be that level of somebody being accountable to making sure that everybody's doing everything. Like you say, it's because there are people out there, and there's some scary stories out there, and it's just unfortunate that because the general public don't know enough, they're going to the people, or they're going based on price and all that kind of stuff, and they're not really understanding what's involved, and therefore that's somebody who's potentially going to have something happen to them. Nobody thinks that it's going to happen to them, but when it does, it's like, well, who did you go to? Did you know enough about them? What regulations were in place? What homework did you do? So I think it all really does stem back to as well, making the general public understand the industry. Think about other treatments as well. There's some amazing treatments out there.
Yeah, you don't.
Regenerative.
There's some people who just don't want Botox and filler, but they want a step up from beauty. They want something a little bit more, but not Botox and filler. So there's so many amazing regenerative treatments now that you could just run a clinic without Botox and filler. You know what I mean? It can be done.
It can be done, because I'm just alone, me being in clinic with you since we've joined forces, the amount of people who I've sat and chatted to and like, oh no, I don't want Botox, and I don't want filler. But how many new clients have come through the doors for polynucleotides, exosomes, skin boosters, microneedling? There's a whole host of clients on our database, and that's what they want. So
just change. It's adapting your business model and thinking, right, what am I about? Who do I serve? What does my ideal client want? And just taking it back and reassessing everything. And I've said it before, and I say it all the time. Just because you class yourself as an aesthetic practitioner doesn't mean you have to do things that everybody else does, or you have to do things in exactly the same way. Because you've got your own unique messaging, you've got your own unique voice, your own unique way of doing things, and you're going to all attract different kinds of demographics and clients. It's not just one thing. And just to summarise before we finish then, I think just for us as an academy, we know we get prescribers and non-prescribers. So we're going to now really get our heads together and do what we can to help both the prescribers who want to do it safely. They want to do the right T's and C's, the right things in place. We're going to do what we can to help them, but we're also going to do what we can to help the non-prescribers. Mm-hmm. So how does that look like in terms of support? If they wanted to do the prescribing course, could we support them? And also, how can we support them if they do need a prescriber? can we give them some kind of database where they know that they've got a prescriber that's doing everything above board?
I think, and it's quite new for everyone at the moment, isn't it? Just from watching a few things from last night and this morning, it's like, and reading some comments, everyone's going into this frenzy when ultimately it's a rule that's been in place for years anyway.
To end on a high note, if you don't want to do your prescribers and you're a nurse, it can still work if you've got a really good relationship with the right prescriber, and you lead your clients that way, and it's going to be a lot easier to do that now. Regulations have tightened up everywhere else. Do you know, everyone's kind of in the same boat.
Level playing field, and like you said, we have enough success stories of students who do this very well without any issues. So A, that tells you that A, as a business model, it works, and B, from a client perspective, there are clients out there who, if they build up that know, like, and trust with you, they'll come to a monthly, they'll come to the clinic where everybody comes and gets an assessment. I think sometimes people try and put too many objections and barriers and maybe excuses, in place, when ultimately it's like, well, there's many people out there that's making a very, very successful business doing this exact thing that's putting a fear of God into people right now.
Absolutely, yeah. We've got living proof of it inside the...
Absolutely. Yeah. And I suppose what we could do as well, if we do, we'll try and put some templates together and things like that. So I would say to everybody who's listening to this podcast as well, just get yourself on the email list.
Yeah.
Go to our website, we'll put the links where they need to be. But if you actually add yourself to the email list, that means that anytime we launch any updates or any news about this, if we manage to, we will be putting some templates together that prescribers could use. And at least if you're on the email list, you'll know that you're going to get everything that you need. So I would encourage people to do that.
Yeah, definitely. Good call.
Yeah.
I'll speak to you soon.